Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. Here it's raining and pouring, and I'm very happy. Just actually stopped maybe 5 minutes ago on my tin roof, so I can actually hear what I'm saying. Anyway, I am here for round two today. For those of us who joined on the membership show earlier on with Jessie, we did the decoding of Notre Dame, which was absolutely fascinating. So we'll be posting that onto Patreon in the next day or two. So watch out for that. And then, of course, I want to say thank you so much and welcome to Susan Dunlap. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. For joining the membership channel. Really appreciate your support. Really, really, really do. So today, again, we have, as I said to you earlier on in the membership show, we've got quadruple trouble with Jessie this week, but that's only because we have 3 weeks of no Jessie after tomorrow. So we have double trouble tomorrow. And of course, we had membership early on. And now we have Jessie with a very brave young woman, Dr. Nancy Crupi. We did speak about her a little bit in our previous shows where we spoke about her being this incredible whistleblower on the healthcare and the judicial system. But she's a scientist and she's a healer and, of course, whistleblower on some of the horrific stuff that has been going on right at the top. And, of course, who better than to have Jessie with us on the show, who's no stranger to taking on the big wigs, right? So, yeah, it's amazing to see people taking on the system, people whistleblowing on what's really going on around at the top, rather, and for us to be able to know what it is because knowledge is power, right? So, without any further ado, here we go. Welcome, Nancy.
Hello,
Welcome,
everyone.
Jessie. Yay, welcome, ladies.
Hello,
So good to
ladies.
have you. How are you, Jess?
Doing well. Yes. Excited for today. I know when I came across your story, I was like, wow, this lady is dealing with the same things, the same secret societies, the same Nazis that I've dealt with, So I'm so excited for you to share your story today with everyone.
Thank you,
Yeah, I
Jessie.
think it's
Thank you,
great.
Chantelle.
Yeah, Nancy, but before we get into your story, perhaps you just want to give us a little background on who you are, how you came to be, just obviously with the whistleblowing and the whole justice system. I know we spoke a little bit off air the other day as well, spoke about the justice system. You're a scientist. So maybe you can share with us how this all started breaking open for you. How did this begin for you, this journey?
Well, thank you so much for giving me the chance to be here, first of all. Definitely. So I'm Italian, I'm from Italy, and I came to the United States in 2016 to work as a scientist. I have a bachelor, a master, a PhD in biology, and then I also got a second level master degree in clinical studies. So my resume is very rich. I have a lot of skills and a very broad expertise, which makes me a perfect prey for this system. And so ultimately how it started is really with me being a very good student and very I and Jessie have a friend in common that I went to college with, and we never partied. I'm the classic person that is really attracted by these schemes because what they look for is talented people ultimately. And so it really started with me wanting to explore the world. I'm the classic girl from the rural area who had been raised by a low income family, and so I'm not privileged. I'm from the lower social classes ultimately. And the fact that I've been able to progress in this pipeline. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Yes.
So I've been able to progress in this pipeline because it's a pipeline, it's really a pipeline for people that come from rural areas and from non-privileged classes because they don't have anybody to help them, right? They don't have anybody to step in and to be like, oh, I know this person, I know this other person, or I know how the system works. We're people who don't know how the system works, so we become easy prey. So it started with me being this very, curious child and wanting to explore and being very, very intelligent, and at the same time not having the privilege of choosing that much what to do next, because I had to study a lot in order for me to win scholarships to stay in college and to pay for my rent because my family could not afford my rent in Rome. And so I've always been very, much like that. And that just simply, when I got out of the PhD, I then decided to apply for a job abroad. And I had 3 job offers, of which 2 were in Europe and 1 was in California. But because I've seen, sorry, because I've seen all of these movies, was where the set was in California, I wanted to go in California, right? So it is a real pipeline. Like they literally use TVs to attract us towards the places where they want for us to go. And at the same time, they deprive
Wow.
people of opportunities in their homeland so that they have to move. And once you move, where do you go? Where they showed you in the movies, right? And so that's exactly where you go. And so ultimately I picked California to come in California, right? But once you're here, you realize it's really the portal of hell. It's like it's really like there are a lot of corporations that do this. Like there are a lot of hospitals that attract people intentionally from Italy, from the south of Italy, from India, from a lot of different places. And so that's how it really started. With me having a dream of going to California because of movies and being very intelligent, and so getting into science. Yeah.
Wow. I find that actually fascinating. And I actually wanted to ask about that. When you were talking about sort of not being of wealthy family and stuff, so you weren't given the privileges in life, right? But really a very, very smart person. So you were able to find your way through education and obviously getting the marks. And as you're saying, being from the smaller areas, it's like the word that came to me was like glorified trafficking, because it seems to me almost like the smart kids. And Jessie, I would love your opinion on this. Actually, it seems like the smart kids, like Dr. Nancy, would maybe slip through the fingers, right, of the system, so to speak, because she certainly has the gifts and the abilities to serve the system well if they'd gotten her when she was a tiny little thing, right? But then finding like phase 2, in other words, the rural kids then being sort of groomed, if you will, to go to the bigger areas like California. So there's nothing exciting in your town. There's nothing happening. There's no opportunities for you. You got to go to the bigger, better places. Jessie, I would love to know your opinion on that, if that sort of system is actually quite organized. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like phase 2.
Yeah, I think that is a part, as Nancy brought out, I think that's very much a part of the system that, they're going to be keeping their eyes on kids. Like she said, they're going to be causing oppressions in certain areas. Why specifically to drive people to other areas where they can, traffic them further. And there's almost an illusion because, the system is big on getting people to willingly participate. So that's, like she outlined, it's like, they cause it so you start to dream, you look outside the box, you think you're getting great opportunities, and you step into that willingly. And, that's part of the victimization then. You chose
Exactly.
that path. You had that opportunity, and what are you going to do with it? But really it puts you in that place of an ethical bind, because once you start seeing the corruption, you know, you're in for a battle with your soul and your own ethical beliefs. So that's very much how they work.
Yeah, I would like for you to say, Jesse, what the system is for the audience. So for if I want to share this episode out, like outside, I feel like people don't know exactly what we're talking
Yeah,
about
so the
otherwise.
system is what I define as like the overall, kind of behind the scenes religion that is in operation. So that's going to, their overall name is the Great White Brotherhood. You get all of your secret societies, your Nazis, organizations, your Kabbalah, Golden Dawn, different sovereign military order night groups are all going to be interconnected with that. And I do have a great resource on my channel, The Kingdom Living with Jessie, on the unveiling of the structure of the system. So if people want to know more about how that system works and operates, they can see that. But we know it by many names: the deep state, the cabal, um, the dark religion behind the Vatican, all of that. It's all the same thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to ask a question just to clarify in case I can share this if you're recording or I don't know exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I think what's become so clear is that unless you have the justice system, the police department, which I guess is also justice, but more law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Really, all your top tier departments involved, the hospitals, the medical field, right? They all have to be working in cahoots with each other for these atrocities to occur. And I think the most important would be the justice system, because they can play the game of lawyering up and having Rottweiler lawyers on each other, but at the end of the day, it's the judge who makes the decision, and it depends in whose pocket that judge is. So they've got to really be so. I mean, it's all the way up to the top. Where does one actually find someone that's not corrupt? But I would love to hear from you, Dr. Crupi, again, if you can explain to us, once you got there, what was it that got you to realize that things were not what they seemingly were? At what point did you start smelling something very not so nice?
Well, this is even more interesting, I feel, in the sense that it really started in Italy, but I thought that Italy was corrupt. And so the reason why I came to the United States ultimately was also because I encountered the same system in Italy. And so I had already realized in the department where I was working that the head of the department or the main chain of command was made of the classic Aryan man with blue eyes, and that women tended to be professors who were women were usually sadistic or not very aesthetically pretty, like women who tended to be then envious of young girls like me who were passionate and smiley, like, like I was bubbly at that time. I'm still, but not that much anymore. But I feel like it was really, I had already realized that it was already very corrupt, and I had already been requested in Italy multiple times to commit fraud, or I had been used to commit fraud by others through my ideas. And so once I got here, I thought, okay, I'm going to see something different. And here at the beginning, it looks very different in the sense that there's definitely more resources, more money, more, it's like doing science, it's way easier than in Italy. And so I thought in Italy people were corrupt because they didn't have money, they didn't have resources, and so they had to make the best of what they had. But here there are no excuses. They have all the money they want, they have all the resources they want, and so if they want to do good things, at this point they should have cured the entirety of human pathologies with all the money they have, and they intentionally misuse all that money. And I feel like I started realizing that it really was like very corrupt when I discovered a possible cure to obesity and I've been requested to hide it, to not publish it. And because my data went against someone else's work, they needed to publish, and so they published the false data instead of my work. And my work was really basically a cure to obesity. And so it was really major. And afterwards, Ozempic became a billion-dollar drug. I had basically discovered the endogenous Ozempic, and they instead, now Ozempic is a billion-dollar drug. So when I saw the enormous, really work and effort that people make, the men who are all Aryan with blue eyes or Aryan people, make a huge effort, and they have very, very intricate strategies to prevent women and immigrants from acquiring power in science and from publishing their work. Because if you publish their work, then you acquire authority. And this has happened before COVID. And so it was really like, before the pandemic, I have witnessed and been victim of all this effort to prevent women and immigrants, so people who are not part of fraternities in the United States, from acquiring power in science, from acquiring authority, the authority to go on a TV and to tell people what kind of things they need to do, and whether a certain medicine is a good thing for them or not, whether a vaccine is a good thing for them or not. And so that's when I started realizing that really it was much, much worse than what I thought. Like, like the beginning is a very, this is like a narcissistic abuse kind of strategy, because these people are narcissistic as well. And so they use the same strategies that you will find in a relationship. And so the very first phase is also always the honeymoon. They make you feel comfortable, they love you, you're amazing, they give you gifts, and there are all of these events for postdocs, and they try to build community. And so at the beginning, you're very lured into this system in which ultimately what they want for you to do is to shut up, to just do your work and not ask for more, as long as you're okay with the salary they give you. Because for immigrants, the salary in the United States is it's 3 times than what we will get at home. But here you barely pay for rent in LA. And so it's really, in the end, I feel like it really depends what kind of people you attract. I'm from Italy, and so I'm from the south of Italy, and so people from the south of Italy come from the Magna Grecia, so it's like the great Greek Empire, and so we have this dignity, these very high expectations, and standards. And so I'm not the kind of person that, because you give me a little gift, I'm gonna give you my ethical, my ethics, in exchange. Like, I have strong ethics because I come from a place where, you know, I have a dignity. I feel like this, I learned it from my grandpa for sure, that he was a very wise man. He was like the chief of the village. So I've been raised by this man who was very wise, and he constantly told me to be on the same as him, to be equal, and he would ask me to call him by name instead of calling him grandpa. And so we will have these very like equal, egalitarian kind of relationships just already as I was a child, a 5-year-old. And he really taught me the value of my word, and of my name, and the fact that I'm important in a sense. Like, I have a value. I'm not just someone who can be sold like this. I'm a person. There's dignity attached to it. And I feel like that's what really kept me from becoming a tool in this system, because I've seen a lot of immigrants that just are like, you know what, I wash my hands on this because I don't want to have anything to do with it. And so they just hand the data to their boss, and their boss publishes whatever they want. That ultimately scientists allow others to use their PhD and their name to commit atrocities, because
Yeah.
polluting science with false data is an atrocity, because you don't know what kind of effect you're going to have. Like, there are people all over the world seeking for cures, and you are giving, publishing lies about things that may have a chain effect, a chain reaction. And this is the 99.9% of scientists today are chosen intentionally to be people who just give away their rights because they're afraid of the consequences. And I'm not like that. So I feel like that's really what changed, what was a game changer for me in that sense.
Mhm.
Just the realization, obviously, more and more, it feels to me like you're being choked. None of your work was being published in its authenticity. All the immigrant employees were doing the work, giving it up to the heads of departments or managers or whatever they are, and then that is being published as theirs, right?
Yeah,
It's
I
not
would
just
love to have you speak more on that, Nancy, because that's exactly how they're stealing, intellectual property.
It makes me think of Tom Althouse and the movie, The Matrix, because sounds like exactly what they did to Tom Althouse.
Yeah, it's
And
exactly what they did to him
wow,
too. Steal it. Like in the author field, they do the same thing where you get individuals that write their manuscripts, things like that, and then they sweep it right out from underneath them, have someone else publish it with variations, and then literally just,
yes,
publish it as in making movies or, books about it, and then, sweep the authorities, the copyrights, all of that right out from underneath the person who is the original creator.
yeah, like this happens all the time. Like it's not, there's so many different ways in which intellectual property is stolen or people are used, because there are two main things. One is ultimately what the academic system wants is to be able to publish whatever thing is on their agenda. But what is on their agenda is not the truth, because if you have decided already what you want to publish, that's not the truth you have found, right? And so this is a system in which academic professors have their own private companies, for example, or they invest in the private companies of their friends. And so at that point, they have a conflict of interest, which is
Right.
oftentimes masked in the sense that they don't always own a company. They oftentimes are simply, investing in startups and things like that. And so then they use, this is the same thing as in soccer when players also bet on how the game is going to go. It's the same thing. Basically, they play in the academic field, which is the one who decides what kind of startup or what kind of project or what kind of thing has a higher chances of being successful. Because let's say I want to start a company that sells a certain product that decreases glucose in your blood and glycemia in a certain way. Then if a scientist publishes something that supports my idea, then suddenly my idea is very promising and everybody wants to invest, and I can get a lot of money out of it. So what they're actually doing is they're using academia to publish things that are on their agenda. But to do that, they don't like to do it on their name, because obviously they are the ones connected to all of these people,
Mhm.
right? And so they either basically ask people to do experiments on certain things, and then if they're willing to be the first author and to allow the professor and the department ultimately to have the last word, then then that person is going to be the first author. But that article is really oftentimes fraudulent in various ways. And so that person becomes a potential criminal, that in case there is an investigation, that person is going to be accused of fraud. And so that's like a way in which they do that. A second way is also, um, obviously, you're going to discover the truth through your experiments, right? And so at that point, if you discover a truth that goes against them, there are two main things that they do. They either tell you, okay, I'm going to put you as a middle author in this patent or in this article in which we say the opposite of what you have found, but you have a reward. You're still part of it, but you don't publish your work. Or they simply really retaliate against you until they can simply tell you, we don't want to publish your work, by, and they terminate you. And so it's really how they really, the only way for them to not publish your work is really to terminate you. So once they terminate you, like I was working at University of Southern California, and I have 6 projects that have not been published. So, and this is like 99% of my data since I, I I started being a scientist has never been published. To publish things that went towards the what the professor had already published in before, and especially because it's also a matter of funding. Like this is like the higher level conspiracy really has to do with startups and private companies where the real money is. But when it comes down to also funds, they give me a second.
Wow.
So when it comes down to
That's
funds, also when they win funds, then they win funds through projects that they write. But usually the professor writes the funds, and professors are chosen not because they're smart, but because they're privileged, because they're part of fraternities, because they're friends of friends, and so they're not good at writing. They're not good scientists. They're not scientists. They're just people put there by someone else as because they're pawns, because they're part of a system, because they're compliant. So they're not good at writing grants. They're not good at having ideas. So what they do is they write these grant proposals, and then for them to keep having the funds year after year, they have to submit reports and show that the project actually works, and that it makes sense, and that it's promising. And so the funding agency, whether it is the government or a private corporation, keeps giving money if the project is promising. But what they do is, obviously, as soon as they start doing experiments on their projects, it's not going to work because those projects are written in ways that are not based on science, but based on really the fantasy of megalomaniac people who are hired as professors. So once they actually find the classic PhD or postdoc like me, will find data that are against those things, they have to hide it. They have to terminate that person, or they have to tell them, leave it to me. I take the last decision. But by doing that, they're ultimately telling you, you're not going to publish your data because this goes against my grant. And the agency is gonna stop funding me if they see that I cheated on the project, And so it's all a matter of money ultimately.
Yeah. And they pick and choose how it's going to go based on where's the most money coming in, who are their alliances, and what do those higher up people really want, you know? And do they, I'm curious, like in these projects, do they kind of have students competing where you're going to have different data and then, it, where they're kind of playing you against each other before they publish and everything?
Yes, not really like that, in the sense that it's way more subtle than that. So I call it a trophy scapegoat triangulation. So
Okay.
what they
That's a
do
good
is,
name for it.
it's really what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's a narcissistic abuse strategy. So I'm also an expert in narcissistic abuse because I've been victim of narcissistic abuse by several partners and bosses, and so I know all these strategies. And so this strategy, basically what they do is way more complex than that, because in science people are smart, and so you gotta really use very subtle strategies for you to not be discovered, by students and by people. That's why they tend to attract people from rural areas, because they tend to be more naive.
Mhm.
And so what they do is, first of all, as soon as you get in, you're the trophy, right? And you're the trophy, and you're given this project, and everybody praises you, and they portray you against others as the new person. And so this creates this enemy, this antagonism between the new people and the people who are already there, because the people who are
Okay.
already there already went through the cycle and are already at the scapegoat phase. They already have had results that don't make sense. They already went and told the boss, and they already know that the boss is cheating, and that the situation is really fraudulent. And so the new person doesn't have to bond with the old people that are already part of the lab. Otherwise, it's going to discover right away what is going on, and it's not going to be used and
Right.
abused as it's supposed to. So it's initially trophied so that it feels special. And when you're trophied and you feel special, and you see others who are miserable, you're like, they're just not as good as I am because they're praising me, right? And
Right.
so as soon as you start discovering how the game goes, then you start also being part of the pool of people who are very unhappy and miserable. But a new person comes in, and that person is made special and trophied, and you are scapegoated now. So the people are put against each other like this. And this happens during lab meetings and situations in
Mhm.
which group situations in which initially there's always one person who is trophied, and suddenly as soon as something happens and you refuse to do what the boss wants, or you don't even know what is going on, because oftentimes you simply just genuinely go and show your data to your boss, and your boss doesn't tell you, I don't like this, what your results, it tells you, yeah, beautiful, but then something changes and you simply are scapegoated and you feel like you're being marginalized or not treated as well as before, but you don't know why, and you start thinking, maybe it's my fault, maybe I've done something wrong, I don't know what happened, or maybe it's
Yes.
true that this new person is better than me, right? And so there is this thing that ultimately, and this goes worse than that, like in my other Asir sign instead, as soon as I arrived, there was already a postdoc or a PhD student who had gone through the same cycle. And what they did to keep me away from her, for us to not bond, because if you bond, especially women, you can file a class action for discrimination. And so they specifically keep women away from bonding with each other when they have been victim of the same kind of abuse. So what they've done there was crazy, because they didn't understand that what this woman was being marginalized, but they were marginalizing her and they were using me against her. And funny enough, we also looked similar with both the curly hair. Um, and they basically, I think they paid the postdoc that was working with me to take me out every night and introduce me to all of his friends, to basically monopolize my attention, because
Mhm.
this guy was getting my same salary and he will pay for me every night. And so basically he will pay, we will go out and he will pay for me. And so obviously I want to go out with you because I'm not even paying. And so basically I didn't bond with her at all. And when she left, we were not even friends. So actually we were kind of enemies. But then the same thing happened to me, and so I understood that it was a
Mhm.
scheme, and then they use another woman after me, and then the same thing they did to the other woman. So it's a chain that they do to all single women, and they choose especially women who are attractive and empathetic, so really light workers, because it's a system that is really narcissistic. And so in a system that is fraudulent and narcissistic, you cannot allow empathetic people to step in, because they're going to just become all whistleblowers, like we all are going to become whistleblowers. And so what they do is basically, I think they have this strategy that this goes even worse, in the sense that they um, and there is a third side of this triangulation, the third phase. The third
Mm.
phase is, once you're gone, then they put against someone else that came after you, and they tell you, check their data and make sure that their data are okay. And so now they're putting against you someone who is usually someone very conservative,
Mhm.
who is gonna be very, especially, see, look at me, like what kind of person I am, right? So they asked a guy who is from India and who married through an arranged marriage to check on my data. So what do you think this guy
Wow.
is going to find? Like obviously he's gonna be very eager to make sure that he finds how this woman that is so sexy and attractive like really is cheating on their data. You know what I mean? It's like, so they pick psychographics to make sure that they act accordingly to what they want. And if they don't act accordingly, they simply assign the same task to another person. I've been one of
Right.
those people who they assign to check on the data of someone else, so that
Mhm.
in case someone else will also come back and be like, I sue you, they can say, someone else said that your data are false. You know what I mean? It's like, so they put people against each other all the
It's
time.
crazy with that. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely crazy how they do that, and very well described, that they're going to
Yeah.
set people in that position. Pretty much you are brought in and you go against those who've already gone through it. They've already scapegoated, and now you're going to double check their data. And
Yes,
then they're going to bring in somebody to do the exact same thing to you and just keep that cycle going. They just keep
absolutely.
repeating it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And but it's even worse. Another strategy I went through was, for example, this is a third level, in the sense that once nothing works, then they make you work with someone who they know is very either envious or critical or misogynistic. And so after you work with them, because if you're the problem is that as you said, I have escaped the whole system because I'm very smart. And so, not for being presumptuous, but really, I realized I'm very intelligent. And so, what happened was that they can't really say anything against me because I'm extremely professional. You can read my emails, like now that I'm bringing to court all my emails and all these things. Like you can see how my boss and the HR director don't even know how to use punctuation. They don't know how to speak in English. It's crazy how unprofessional they are in writing. And instead, I'm always perfect with all like things, commas and things and point and go, like how I write was so perfect. They could not. I was the person with the most projects, the most number of students under me. I was mentoring a lot of people. People saw me as a reference person. I'm a leader. I'm a natural born leader. So many things. It's difficult for them to go against someone like me to say you are unprofessional, because I'm usually more professional than my boss, and or you're insubordinate, because I usually really follow the rules. So it's very difficult. And so in these cases, they have to use another strategy, which is they put you to work with someone that they know is going to be envious of you, for example, or they know is a lot conservative. And I'm very, someone who is opposite to me specifically, because I'm like a very visionary, out of the box kind of person. So they made me work with people, like with a man once, who then they asked him, how is it working with her? So that he could say, I didn't like it. She's stupid. This guy called me stupid in the hallway. And I'm like, how do you dare? Like I'm still a scientist, right? And it was a classic Aryan man with blue eyes. And then two women stepped in to say, no, these guys did the same to us as well. And they told HR, and I've been saved by these two women, basically. But another time they put me to work with this young Indian woman, very conservative, and they started being very kind of like rigid on things. And I'm like, yes, this is science, but like you should also kind of like go around things in certain ways. Like this is still science. But she was very rigid. And I feel like they did it with the same intention, but I'm not even sure this
Yeah.
went through, because I think they messed up a little bit, because then once my boss reported me, they tried to report me to say that I was unprofessional or something, right? And created a whole constructed accident. He yelled at me to tell me that I was insubordinate and unprofessional, but by yelling at me, he demonstrated being unprofessional. And I think this
Yeah.
woman heard it, and so they had to get rid of her. And now she's working in Harvard, so that they recommended her for something that they can say, oh, she's in Harvard, she did not deserve to be at Harvard. But they recommended her for Harvard. And so that's how they work. You see, like they really
Yeah.
manipulate things so that they put you against people that they give title to, that they give awards, that they create, and then they're like, you see, there is this chess piece that I'm putting against you, and the public opinion doesn't know any of that,
Yeah.
so in a public court, that's how ultimately it
And
works.
you're kind of screwed either way. They play it both ways. Like, if you do the proper procedures, like the charting, the documentation, you're doing everything by the book, they're going to say you don't have to do it that way. And then, if you refuse, now it's insubordination, right? But if you go the other way, if you listen and you don't do it, right, then they're going to get you down the line of, oh, you knew better. You knew that you needed to do it. So they set it up so either way, you're set up to fail. They put in all these sabotages, um, that are built in, and it's a multiple tiered sabotage. They're gonna get everybody stuck in that double bind and kind of wield those situations however they want that outcome to come, based on who's gonna comply and who's not.
I guess absolutely. And with people like me I am like extra in terms of like how much I work and how much I achieve. And so with people like me, what they do is really the only thing they can do is to sabotage you. And so what
Yeah.
they did with me, for example, at a USC, was they asked me with the excuse that they needed they needed the list of my projects that I was working on, and the fact that I needed to work for a year at least on those things. They needed a list of projects to send to the HR. They told me that it was just an excuse. So what they did afterward, after I sent this, basically I sent this email in which I said all the projects that I was working on and all the deadlines and all the things that I was doing and how, how good I was, but it was the truth, all those things I was really doing. And after I sent it to them, they basically, once they saw, okay, I said, for example, this project is going to take 10 more months. So at that point, they knew exactly what I was supposed to do for me to complete that task, and they could sabotage it better. And so what they did was, for example, at some point I had to complete certain projects, and I needed cell cultures for that. And we preserve cell cultures in cryoprotective tanks that need to be refilled often with liquid nitrogen in order for the cells to be kept at a certain temperature. And if for whatever reason the tank dries out, all the cells die. And so I needed those cells to complete my project. And one day we found the tanks completely empty. Another day we found the freezer completely thawed. So
Wow.
they, like, you know what I mean? It's like there's so many ways in which your projects can be sabotaged, or they prevent you from working with people who actually are they make you work with people who are passive aggressive and who they know they're going to try to sabotage your work because they already are sadistic on their own. Things like that, like they prevent you from working with students that can help you do your work, that like maybe it's a lot of things. It's ultimately there's so many ways in which they can sabotage your work if they want, especially if they ask you this information in unsuspected times. Like they ask me to provide all this information before starting to retaliate against me. And so obviously I gave all the information. I did not expect for them to use it against me. And ultimately, I haven't completed any of those projects. I haven't published any of those projects.
Wow. What I find so fascinating here, and I shouldn't be surprised because you see this in the movies or whatever all the time, this interwoven mafia at the top of these systems, right? And the way you're explaining it now is incredible. It's like they obviously have done so many studies. They would have studied you, your personality, your characteristics, these psychological tests they do on you. Makes me wonder why they're actually doing these psychological tests, actually. When you go to these work agencies, the headhunters and stuff, you have to fill out application forms and do all sorts of aptitude. I don't know if you call that. I haven't done it forever and a day.
Yeah, I know
But
what
the
you're
thing,
talking about. They have a plethora of them, in the
right?
universities, and they tell you that they want to make sure that you're going into the right thing, that's what goes along with your characteristic, your demeanor, that you're going into the right field and career, and
But it's way deeper than that. Like for example, I think first of all that they use Ayurvedic characteristics and very ancient types of characteristics. Like I'll give you an example. Like in a USC, for example, there was a man specifically in the lab, a Latino guy who was a very long-standing employee, and then he basically every time I feel like he was a kind of spy for them because he asked me several questions that ultimately led to specific actions against me. One time he asked me whether I have freckles and whether my eyes change color. I have hazel eyes that change color between brown and green. And I was like, yes, I have freckles and I have eyes to change color. And I have a widow peak here. So based on astrology and ancient alchemy, I am a person ruled by Mars because of all of these things. And I'm a leader and I'm a warrior. And so people like me are told to destroy all the obstacles are all along the way. And so I'm like a very feared enemy. And so this guy intentionally asked me once I started having issues, he didn't know about any of that supposedly, and he started asking me, "Do you have freckles? Do you have eyes that change color? Why would you ask me these questions? It's such a weird thing."
Right.
The same guy asked me what trail I will take to go to home from work with my bicycle, and 2 days after I've been hit by a car after he asked me that. And so it
Oh,
was
wow. Yeah.
obviously an
So you're
informer.
like, there's maybe more nefarious things in that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a very, like, my body type is believed to be the warrior, the warrior type, because I have like have a butt, and so the people with a booty and with this kind of like hourglass figure of people who can run, in a sense, like people who have a big resistance also, because it's like in humans, fat is stored in the butt or in the legs, like in the butt. So people who have this kind of figure are like the camel of the animal kingdom, in a sense. People who have a lot of resistance are very resilient, but at the same time are very good fighters. So you know, they base their discriminatory strategies also on physical characteristics, because I've done them.
Right.
I've seen many women with my body type, being discriminated.
Hmm.
And so it's really a matter of just, not just the psychographics. Like you don't even need to do tests if you're a scientist, and if you have access to all of these correlations between physical traits. And you don't
Wow.
even need to be a scientist. Like there are ancient cultures that talk about this,
Yeah.
like Ayurveda. It's very well known, and I have a Pitta energy is called. So people with Pitta energy are revolutionaries. People with Pitta energies are people who fight for things. And so you can easily tell from my body type that I have Pitta energy. And so they don't even need to do a test on me. They know. And
Because they
I'm a
know that. Yeah, they
what?
know. They've already
Yeah,
done it, haven't they? Yeah.
it's so
Yeah,
easy
the
to
same with
to
the
figure that
Aryan
out.
types, that you talked about that, like the female
Yeah.
body type for the Aryan types, you get more that stick figure, tall, lengthy, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's not necessarily, you don't even need the psychographics, but for example, at Cedar Sinai, once a woman told me, when you arrived, I thought you were a professor because you have this way of, talking and walking, that you have authority, you have dignity, and so people, you can tell that I am a potential, leader in their field. And so obviously, if they don't want to have immigrants in their field, people like me are really enemies for them, because I'm a very good competitor. It's like, unless you kick me out, if you have to go by merit, I'm gonna have to become a professor. You have to promote me to become a professor. So the only way to sabotage me from obtaining what I deserve, is to create all of these strategies. And so ultimately, I think what actually happens in these cases is that they try to attract people who are naive and weak and not courageous, and so they step away. They just say, okay, they become pawns, but they mistakenly attracted a leader in this net. And so I'm not a pawn, not because I don't want to be, I'm not.
Yeah. Mm.
Wow. It's amazing. I mean, it's fascinating. And it's so true what you say. I've never thought about it like that, in terms of, obviously, with the different body types, there's certain what do you call it, attributes to certain body types which they would have seen. And I actually wanted to ask you, Jessie, as well, why, I mean, Dr. Nancy's spoken a lot about, she noticed the majority of men, or I guess all men maybe, that were in positions of authority, with these Aryan looking guys with like fair hair and blue eyes. So what is that about? Is that actually specifically chosen, or is it just the way that it played itself out, that the guys just happened to look like that?
I think I would say overall in the system you get two types, and what it comes down to is, they're breeding for those that they classify as gods, lowercase g. And they're looking for certain features. They're definitely looking at the spiritual aspects. Is that person positive, negative energy? Everything at the end of the day, I think, comes down to their sex magic. In order to achieve that godhood, they have to be able to engage in that. And with that, they find that there's certain characteristics that are more alluring, more drawing. Um, I think that goes back to even the human forms that Lucifer chooses to take. You have, his one side that's very, fair skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and then you get the other side that's more your dark Aryan, which is the dark brown eyes, the kind of golden skin on both, but the darker hair. So I think that it almost becomes a homage to Lucifer in a way, the features, um, and that their belief that they are ascended as gods, and that's the features they think that are more godly, more desiring than others. But
Wow.
you
That
know,
is just so fascinating. And also to see how they've chosen women. And they've obviously, I mean, women, we either each other's greatest cheerleaders, right? Or we tend to have horrific relationships with each other's in the workplace often when there's that competition and that sort of thing going on. And it's amazing how they've manipulated that because, I mean, when women stick together, we stick together. There's nothing anyone is going to do that changes that. And they know that. So they're going to go to whatever length they can to, as you say, have the opposite effect of that. Play the one up against the other. Make sure you aren't actually teaming up until you
Oh,
do start
yeah.
teaming up, right?
I have to tell you the next phase of this also, like, 'cause there's more. So I used to have a USC specifically. I used to have a best friend in the department, just randomly. I'm not, like, I'm not the kind of person that tries to build community or build relationships intentionally with the idea of building safety nets. I tend to be, I go to the gym, I do things, and so I tend to attract people as well who want to do things with me. So I became friend with this woman who was Aryan. She was like blonde with blue eyes and tall and skinny. And afterwards, she has been put against me. So that, like, if she's put against me, we cannot file anything together. We
Mhm.
cannot support each other. And she has basically intentionally been sent to basically tell my boss that she needed a job. She has been terminated. So she has been channeled towards my boss to go and tell my boss, do you have a job for me? And because she had in the same time, someone had told her to start getting my same kind of skill set. And so when she got and talked to my boss, she was basically my perfect replacement. So it was me against her suddenly. She could have been a
Wow.
friend, and instead suddenly she became my worst enemy. I didn't
Right.
care about that. I didn't care about that, and we kept talking, but we're not friends anymore because then she got relocated when they saw that this was not working properly. She got relocated.
Mhm.
And another woman who was sticking with me as well, she got relocated. And another woman who was, you know, they were trying this girl that they were trying to put against me. She probably didn't do it. She's now in Harvard. So you see how they simply move away the pieces, and as long as, like, either they work in their favor or they move them away. Like, that's
Mhm.
really how it
Wow.
works.
That
Wow.
sounds similar. Like, I know they do a lot of things. You kind of had two classes of women that they're looking for. One is going to be kind of your trophy wives. They want the women with the genetics. Um, they're all going to fight to be able to have that woman as a wife purely so they can, have hybrid hybrid offspring. Um, but it's like they'll lure women into those relationships, even if they're brilliant. And then all of a sudden, that woman is going to give up her career. She's going to be put as you know, become a mom, and they're going to totally shift her focus out of the professional into that home sphere with the kids, and thus devaluing, that woman. The other type that they're looking for are those that they're going to classify more as priestesses, and just in general, because, when they're in their magic circles, they're going to align themselves with these high level women, that are going to give them access into the spiritual world. So, that's what you see a lot, is that it's not just that these, sadistic women are, um, kind of any less, I don't even know how to even put it, but you get, just the women that they're going to raise up are usually put into those two categories in their world. And yet at the same time, in the one category, those women are able to elevate themselves. They become the ones really who are controlling those men through, through through the sexual sphere and through the magical sex. So you get these high level women in the system who really, are going to be controlling everything in the magic circles that they all participate in their secret societies. Um,
Wow.
so it's interesting. And if you don't fit into either of those categories,
Yeah.
like you, Nancy, they're like, no, she doesn't, she wants to do her own thing. She wants to be established ethically and actually do her job. You don't
And
fit
actually do
into
your job.
their agenda, right? So
You actually want to do your job.
ethically. That's
Wow.
lawfully
What's
and ethically.
It's amazing because they don't just have the men at the offices shouting the odds and throwing their weight around, but they've got their witchy wives then in the background casting spells and stuff.
Who are the
So
virtue
it's,
squad? Well, they're the virtue squad. They
yeah,
come in. I've
wow.
seen that too, where you get, I don't know if it was the same in the science field, but I've seen it at other places where you get, campus living. You get husband and wife teams that are connected to the universities who are going to come in as your mom and dads for your units. They're going to lavish things upon you, do special invites, have you in their home for dinners or special events, cater to these students and kind of be like, parents in a way while they're away from their homes. And in that, they use the wives to really be that virtue squad, where they set the
Wow.
the standard, the ethics, and if you're not complying, those women are the ones who are going to confront you, that, hey, you know, maybe you should do this instead. And they're going to come over and, they'll take you out for lunch even. And yet in that lunch, they're going to demean, they're going to devalue, they're going to, in their nice, nice way, be like, oh, I heard you didn't, I heard you did this or this, but
You weren't
maybe you should have
published.
done that or that, I don't know. It's like that Southern women, where they're like, oh,
Yeah,
aren't you a peach? But really it's a curse, not a, they're not really
right.
giving compliments. But
It's very interesting because it just shows you how all of this stuff just interweaves at these high levels. But Dr. Nancy, I want to ask you as well. Now, obviously, you got to a point where you decided so far and no further, and you decided to go legal. So do you want to talk us through that? At what point did you decide enough is enough? And I'm not sure how much you can say about that right now. I am aware that there's obviously stuff you can and can't say. So please just feel free to say what you can. But I'd be interested to share with our viewers at what made you decide enough was enough and take it legal.
Well, I have to be honest. I really didn't like potentially going legal, because especially in science, ultimately what you want is really to be able to progress with your career, to just be left alone to do your thing, because I really just wanted to be a scientist. I wasn't trying to become rich or anything like that. And so once I started being victim of retaliation because I reported fraud at USC, and more than what I can say, I'm worried about the time here, because you said you have an hour. Maybe it's better to like give
No, we
a
can carry.
little.
Yeah, we can carry on another 15, 20 minutes. We're good. We're good. Yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
okay. Because otherwise you can have another episode on this. But overall, I feel like once I reported fraud and the discrimination and the fact that my boss was harassing me due to his conflict of interest, in which he was basically trying to force me to coerce me to change the way in which I will write I will present the results of the clinical studies that I was working on. And so we had some negative results, and I reported the fact that he was asking me to manipulate these results to hide these results from the clinical study report. And once I reported it, they started retaliating against me very, very heavily. They sent me to a very heavy, complex PTSD. I developed cardiac pathologies because of all the stress they made me go through the meetings. I started having being requested to have meetings with these people who were supposed to be, the head of the research compliance office, the head of one of the ombuds, which is supposedly a whistleblower office from the government. And instead, they were all people who were trying to frame me. Either they were private investigators, like people who were investigators in the past, detectives, police officers. And so I started being basically framed with all these professional militaries, basically, who were basically trying to frame me for something wrong. And once I realized that they were trying to frame me, and then they started creating a hostile environment in the lab, and they basically created the premise to potentially accuse me of damage. That's when I started realizing that I had to sue them. Maybe they were doing that to harass me or to make me step back. I'm not sure exactly what their strategies was, because it was obvious for me that if you get to that point, then I'm going to hire a lawyer. So I'm not really sure what they're trying to do. And so I hired a lawyer, but then that's when the whole story really starts, in the sense that when I hired a lawyer, I thought, I had contacted a few lawyers, like 6 or 10 lawyers, and they all kind of tried to deter me from proceeding in the lawsuit, because they told me, whistleblowers face a lot of issues, a lot of challenges. You can end up being in prison, and they were right. But at the same time, I didn't have anything else to do, because my boss was not going to give me any reference letters, and without reference letters, you don't get a new job in academia. I was not being allowed to complete my projects, and without intellectual property, you don't go anywhere. You can't apply for grants. So they were basically blocking me on every side. So what am I supposed to do? Go back to my small town after all the work I've done? I'm not going to do that. And so obviously my only choice was to file a lawsuit, and I hired this lawyer. And initially they were immediately very positive, and so I was like, wow, the first lawyer who is positive. And instead it was a trap, because later on this lawyer, I discovered, he was corrupt by them. It was part of their team. And I realized the whole network. Like, I was working at USC, and then this lawyer who had graduated, I think, at USC and at Southwestern University as well. I realized that these two universities are actually, their dorms and are located nearby, and so probably the students are part of the same fraternities. And this is Loyola University, Southwestern, and USC. They basically belong to the same fraternities. And so I realized that by talking to a lot of lawyers. And so basically he tried to silence me. He tried to force me to sign a settlement agreement in which I will be completely deprived of any freedom of speech regarding what happened, because if I would even just belittle my boss or USC, they will be able to find me for $2,500. But it's very easy to then become a slave of these people, because I was already being targeted by private investigators who were pretending to be people who wanted to interview me, for example, to basically force me to talk badly about my boss. So it's very easy, you know, once you sign something like this, you're basically in a cage, because then you can be attacked from all sides and they can frame you as soon as you do something that they don't like, which may be anything, you know, like if you apply for a job and they don't like it, then they send someone for you to badmouth your boss. And so for me, the biggest win in this story has really been that I've been able to keep my freedom of speech, that I haven't signed anything that really deprived me of my freedom of speech. And so I didn't sign those things. And which also included a reference letter from my boss, in which basically he was disparaging me first, and then he basically said that I was the one coordinating the projects where I had reported fraud. And so I decided to not. It was basically a self-incrimination if I had signed those agreements. And so I decided to refuse to sign, and I fired the lawyer. But to do that, I had to pay $12,000 to you know, do that. And then I became a pro se litigant. And, you know, I had no idea at that time that I was going to have so much difficulties finding legal representation, because then afterwards I contacted 200 lawyers. I repeat, 200 lawyers. Like basically there is a website in the United States called SILA.org, which is basically the employment lawyers. And there are like hundreds of people in there. I have basically exhausted the database, and nobody wanted to represent me as soon as they realized how messy basically how messy the case became after. It was a perfect case. I had all the proofs. I had even a video recording of my boss harassing me, and of the HR and his assistant professor conspiring against me. A recording that is now public, because it's an evidence in the case, and so it's now a public how do you say, property. And so I had everything I needed, you know, for the case. And the lawyer really messed it up a lot, because he filed the case without telling me. He filed the case in arbitration first, without even telling me that he was doing that, without showing me the case that he filed, nothing. So he did everything behind my back. And so once I finally realized that, and I tried to look for lawyers, and they realized how messy the situation was, I think I understood now, after talking to Jessie and after seeing all these things I went through. I think they knew who I was dealing with, and that's why they didn't want to represent me, because that's like they were very excited as soon as I would tell them, you know, I'm a whistleblower, of all the proofs and everything. They were very excited, and as soon as they would realize what kind of sabotage I had gone through, I think they would immediately understand that there was something bigger that I was not figuring out. You know, there was something bigger behind it, that it was not just me, it was not just a small case. There is a huge story behind it. And they knew that I was gonna find this hostility in court, because, you know, it's something I'm going against a whole system of people. And so that's why. But ultimately, by doing so, they allowed me to go by myself in court and to discover by myself how it really works. Because what we were saying before is that wait a second, because my phone is about to die. What you were saying is that what you were saying is basically that you know, lawyers can do whatever they like, right? But if they don't, the judge is the one taking the decisions, right? So what they do truly is that the judge, and this is a whole scheme that I have observed in court, and so basically they allowed me to go into the system where they clean their dirty laundry, and now I know how it works. And so now I got in by myself in court, and I saw how non-impartial the system is, how this, what they do really, how it works is that the judges pretend to be moody. A judge is moody, you know, today I'm in a bad mood, and so I'm gonna be saying no to everybody. What's that? Like, are you kidding me? How dare you? You're paid with our tax money to do your job. Now you do your job. If you're in a bad mood, go to a psychiatrist. What is that? And instead, they are allowed to be moody and to decide that today they're in a bad mood and that they want to deny the requests of people that come to court. Nonsense. And what the lawyers do is they play the game with them. And so by playing this game, it looks like the judge is taking the decision, and they have to tiptoe around the mood of the judge. So this is the most dangerous thing, because ultimately lawyers are truly adapting themselves to this moodiness of the judge, and they're tiptoeing around the ego of the judge. This should be a crime. Like, being moody as a judge should be a crime.
Wow. Wow. That's
Yeah.
actually it's actually amazing what you're saying. Is like moody, like whatever I feel like it. It's that narcissistic control that they have. I'm in control, and you better hope that today you're on my right side.
But they do it intentionally. Like, it's not that they do it because they truly are moody. They do it when they have no other choice, in the sense that they know that the decision they're gonna have to make is illegal. It's against the law. And so who can they blame? They have to blame their own moodiness. I was in a bad mood that day, or I had something that happened to me. I'm human, right? So they use it intentionally. So because I read people, I'm very, very awakened. So I know when people are lying, when people are truthful. I know a lot of things. I read people's eyes, and so I know a lot of stuff about these judges that I've been facing in court. And so it's really crazy how they do. And I've seen famous people being persecuted by these judges through the same strategy. And this is the same court ultimately that has done what has done to Britney Spears, because these delay courts. So this is like a bunch of misogynists, really. There's really no excuse for that. It's really like a bunch of judges and they're all men. Like, the entirety of the judges, even from a likelihood, from a probability standpoint, have not faced any woman in court. Like, I've had 2 men arbitrators, 4 male judges. Guys, it's like, where are women in this system? It's impossible. No, 5 male judges. It's crazy. It's like too many. Like almost 10 judges and arbitrators. It's all men. Where are the women?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and they, it's like it's a form of intimidation too, because for most of us, the law is supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to be individuals who look at a case and and go through things as a neutral person and then make the decision. But they're not even making the decision based on, half the time, the evidence or anything like that. Many times they're not even looking, they're not even investigating. They're simply making it off their mood or how they feel, or because they've been paid. I think that's the biggest thing. They've been paid, and they have these allegiances to these secret societies, these Nazi organizations, and they're bound by those oaths over their oaths to we the people. They're bound by their brotherhood and their sovereign military vows, and to their circle groups. That's who their allegiance is to, and they can't go against their brothers. So if a lawyer comes in there and they know it's their brother, it's really their circle groups and those behind them making the decisions of who they decide what on. It's not even based on whether you really committed a crime or not,
Absolutely, I agree with you. That's exactly what I've experienced. That the whole system is very, I say, politicized, because I don't have personal experience in secret societies. But what I mean by politicized is that there is a political line, political agenda that is being applied to court and is being brought forth through court. And so if your can you hear me? If
Yes.
your lawsuit, if you winning is okay with that political agenda, then you're gonna win. If it's against, then you're not going to win. That's really what it is about. Like, there's no justice. There is no such a thing as justice in the United States, but even in Italy. And I feel like in Italy is a lot better, but still, it's really the same in the end, that you just have to pick the judge that is the right pawn for you to make the decision. So in Italy, we don't have these many fraternities and sororities. Like, it's very different. I feel like the kind of system we have here is much, much worse and much, much bigger and much, much more powerful. I feel like in Italy, a lot of people just really are very good at what they do, and they are capable of becoming a judge. I don't think here there are any judges who become judges without being someone in a fraternity. So it's a very
Wow.
different kind of system here.
Yeah,
And you can
absolutely.
tell, like, this moodiness, it's not the moodiness, it's not because they're moody, it's because, as you're saying, they have to bring forth the agenda of potentially a secret society. I don't know what they actually are doing, whether it is a government or a secret society, but they're bringing
Yeah.
forth an agenda, and so they can't bring forth that agenda, because being a judge also means that you have taken decisions for a long time. Okay, and so if then you go against yourself with a decision, someone can use that. It's like a chess game. Someone can use that against you in a case, because what I do in the United States, it works through case law is important. So it's not just about the law. So you can say this thing is against the law. You can also say this thing is against the law, and the same judge has chosen the opposite thing 10 years ago. So what? Now he's wrong? Was he wrong 10 years ago, or is he wrong today? So you're basically checkmating them. And so the only way for them to not checkmate themselves is to pretend to be moody, so that they can say always, I was moody. I don't know what I was doing. I was not myself that day.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Crazy.
It is so organized and so contrived, and it has to, it has to crack. Sure. Dr. Nancy, I know we're sort of coming to the end of our show for today, but I'm wondering if you could just in closing, tell us where you're at now. Is there anything you can tell us where you're at with the court case? Is it still going on? Is it done? And yeah, how is this, I want to say, how has this changed or affected you? I'd actually be very interested to hear about that as well. Like, this going through something like this never ever leaves you unchanged. You have to, because you've really been through the ringer with these guys, not only in your career first, but now also in the legal system. So where are you at with all of that?
So legally speaking, what actually happened, because this is like I'm talking about, the general things, but in reality, then it's really a struggle, in the sense that for me, what they've done is they blacklisted me as well, and so it was difficult for me to find any jobs, and all the jobs that I found were ultimately traps in which they tried to frame me for theft, frame me for fraud, frame me for they basically tried to use my sources of income against me a lot of times, to the point of basically forcing me out of a lot of potential jobs. They harassed my clients, harassed my business partners. They took down they basically, someone manipulated my podcast partner to take down my podcast, because my podcast portrayed what kind of person I was, and they were trying to portray me like a narcissist in court. And they, so many things. And so for me to be able to become a pro se litigant, and to follow this case, and to do all the things that I had to do, because these were really a divine mission in which I've been channeled since I was a child. And for me to be able to carry that out, I really had to change in a lot of ways, to adapt in a lot of ways, which ultimately brought me to become a better person, in a sense. But I wasn't a bad person before, so I didn't need to change very much. I just matured through a lot of challenges. and I had to drive Uber for 2 years because I couldn't find any job. And I was like, you know what? If they think that because the only thing I can do is drive Uber, rideshare driving for a living, I'm gonna give up. I'm not gonna do that. So I'm gonna rideshare drive for a living. And I did it, and I've been able to follow the case for 2 years thanks to that, without having to rely on employment and things where they could frame me, because it's self-employment in the end. And then afterwards, I really had to I struggled a lot with mental health and physical health, because all these abuses I received have been literally surrounded by private investigators, spies, associates of USC students who will book my classes, who will pretend to be clients. And then they have these eye by an eye, teeth by a teeth, kind of tooth by a tooth kind of rule. And so basically, every time I would accuse them of something in court, then they will someone else will basically frame me for the same outside of court. So once, for example, I told the judge that what he was doing was basically attempted murder, because he was trying to kill me. Like, I'm telling you that I'm in a hardship already because of all these situations, and you're not recognizing that you're basically trying to kill me. Like, because what am I supposed to do? An hour later, I receive an email. So I also am I serve plant medicine, like not plant medicine really, but like I serve combo, which is I don't know if you know about that. Is a Peruvian, like Southern American shamanic medicine, and it's been miraculously helped me in a lot of ways. And so I serve it now. And but however, it's, you cannot give these things to like pregnant women, for example. And so pregnant women are excluded. An hour after I filed this thing, or a few hours after, I get contacted via email by a woman telling me, hi, I'm pregnant. I'm like 3 or 4 months pregnant or something like that. But I really need to do combo. I've done it like 20 times. Can I do it? And I'm like, if I had said yes, they could have accused me of double attempted murder. So you know what I
Wow.
mean? It's like, this
Yeah.
is this is exactly what I'm talking about. So I've been constantly attacked on the things that I need as a source of income, for example, in ways that basically made everything become a minefield. So that has been very, very stressful for me. And really, I had to change in a lot of ways. Like, and I didn't realize how much my life has become very uh, strict in a way that I don't perceive it as strict. I'm having a healthy lifestyle in my mind, but reality is that as soon as I then have relationships with people, like I hosted my podcast partner before he betrayed me at my home for a month, and I realized through him that I was really, really, like, my lifestyle has a very rigid kind of things right now that I do every day that I don't do, because it's a way for me to prevent them from affecting my mental health. And so I'm like OCD in a way that I'm not OCD. I simply stay in a very narrow window of values of things that I do and I don't do. And by doing that, I can keep going, right? But as soon as someone
Right.
enters your life and you're like, oh, are you okay with me moving this thing? Or I'm like, no, please leave things as they are, because there is a reason for that, you know? And so I don't realize that I've really become very, very rigid in a sense, or like I don't drink alcohol anymore. I don't really have the fun that I used. I don't go to clubs, like I have a very healthy and spiritually focused lifestyle, but it's almost as if I'm becoming a nun. If it makes sense, it's like I really don't do the great majority of the things that I used to do before. So really, I shrunk a lot in terms of what kind of things I'm doing and my degrees of freedom, although I've done it intentionally, in a sense, like in the sense as a way to be able to cope with all these situations for me to keep going. But, if I didn't have this situation, I would have not to do that in the first place. And so definitely
Right.
changed me a lot.
Wow.
It basically forced me to change my lifestyle and me as a person and what I do, and in a lot of ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I would love to actually carry on this conversation again at some point. Really, I would. I think it's super fascinating. And I absolutely commend you for the strength and the courage and your bravery. I mean, I cannot begin to imagine what you must have been through. So, really, and I know you're still going through it. So I know I'm sure everyone here joins me in just wishing you everything that is best with whatever it is that you still need to face. But I think it's amazing that you're blowing the whistle and you're taking the lid off this thing, because immediately, as we always say, knowledge is power. And, you know, when we start shedding light on these atrocious acts, this is organized crime at its highest level. I mean, please, man, the mafia's got nothing on this. You know, I mean, the
Absolutely.
mafia is just the front guys, you know, really, it's absolutely shocking. But Jess, I would just like to have, you know, what do you have to say in closing with Nancy's testimony tonight or
Yeah,
this
I
morning
think,
for me?
I think it's absolutely right. And what a fight, it's such a fight. Yet, I also commend you just for your strength in that. And I know you are right in the midst of that. So I encourage people, you know, check out, I think, Shanti, were you going to put up the link to her thing? I encourage people, check that out. You know, what gets us through is support. What gets us through is prayers. So I encourage everybody to be keeping you in prayer, and uh, check out how they can help as the legal fight continues. You're tackling a beast that is a very complicated system.
Absolutely, and indeed
Yeah.
it is. Nancy, is there anything you would like to say in closing?
Well, I thank you very much for what you're doing, both Chantelle and Jessie. I feel like I'm really glad of having met the two of you and connecting. This is incredible, and I feel like we're just doing the right thing. We are the hunters of the hunters. I call people like us, and it's just a matter of time.
Absolutely.
It's just some other time. We are built to win, and we oh, yeah. Thank you. And definitely this is beautiful what we're doing, and we are going to be winning. It's just a matter of time because these people are falling, and I can see that. um we're just the first the first tier of people that are going to go against this system, because it's becoming more and more, the new generations, for example Gen Z's, this trophy scapegoat triangulation that I'm talking about used to have, what we call the middle age crisis is really when people are scapegoated. And so they start going into a crisis because they start knowing too much about the system to the point of not being useful to the system anymore, and they get rejected.
Yeah.
So the middle age crisis has become earlier and earlier. And so I had it at 33, in the sense that they rejected me at 33, right? 35. And so now Gen Zs, the reason why they're having these very high salaries and very fast careers in tech is because um, these this time frame is shortening, and so companies are aware that people become aware of the system earlier and earlier because we are becoming more intelligent. We are not the analphabetic people that our grandparents were. Now we study, we have an education, we use psychedelic medicine, so we do a lot of things that ultimately increase our consciousness. And because of that, this time frame shortens and shortens. And so this also means that the system is in crisis because they're trying to prevent this from happening. But after a while, now they're gonna have to replace us with AI and with robots, because people are not, kids today, a kid is more aware than a 40-year-old of 20 years ago. And so it's becoming an impossible task for them. Like, it's really unsustainable because the consciousness of the population is rising. So this system is just bound to fall. It's just a matter of time. And the population is just, people like us, like Jessie, like Chantelle, are really doing a great job at making the population aware and educate people so that they, even the population can spot these things happening. So there are no lies that are going to stand anymore. It's just a matter of time. So please share, please support me if you can, guys. And please share Chantel's podcast and Jessie's work and my work as well, if you can, because this is really what we need to do to like spread awareness.
Absolutely. Dr. Nancy's details are in the description area of this video, as well as running across the ticker at the bottom of the screen right now. Wow. Jessie, would you maybe end off for us in prayer if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Heavenly Father, we know that it is such a strong fight and such a battle, Lord. But I thank you that you have given Dr. Crupi courage. You give her strength. You continue to give her fortitude and knowledge as to how to address those that she's fighting against. And Father God, we ask for your blessing. We ask for your breakthrough in this fight. We ask that you will supply the full need, that she may be able to battle them to the full extent in the courts. Lord, you know that the enemy comes, that the enemy blocks every avenue of income, every avenue of support, in hopes that he can stop her from going forward in this fight. But we ask that you would break that through, Lord. We ask that you would supply for her need in full. And we ask, Lord, that you will make that way where there seems to be no way for her, Lord. Where the way has not been made, we ask, Lord, that you would just open up avenues that she could not even imagine or dream, Lord. And we thank you that you are with her, that you are walking with her every step of the way. We thank you that that you've given her, surrounded her with people, Lord, who understand the battle that she's in. And Lord, we just thank you that that you shall secure the victory, because your word says that you came to destroy the works of the devil. We ask that you would destroy these evil works against her. In your name we pray, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jess. And thank you, Dr. Crupi. Thank you, Joanne. You see, when you open your eyes after you've prayed, voila, there's money.
Thank you, Joanne.
Joanne, you're such a sweetheart. You know I love you. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you all being here today. And we will see you again tomorrow with Jessie. I know one of the shows, or maybe even two, will be on solutions. We're talking about territorial spirits and witch doctors. So we're bringing in quite a bit of South African and African information tomorrow. Just a little bit of stuff that we're going to be sharing with you about that as well. So join us at our usual time for Double Trouble. Okay, guys and girls, God bless you all. Take good care, and I shall see you very, very soon.